Hi, LaDonna.
Mm. Hi, Patricia.
I'm so happy to see you, and which I can do because we're on video together, and
Mm.
to just be able to explore some really interesting topics together today. So I really
Mm.
appreciate you being up for this.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, are you noticing any parts as we begin?
Mm. Definitely a little something in my belly. It feels a little bit like excitement. I notice a little shift in my breath, just bringing some awareness to how I'm breathing. And yeah, I have a little one that I've had to work with this morning that um, sometimes gets concerned about what I choose to share out loud. So I've been spending a little time with her, but she seems pretty settled and hanging out on the
Mhm.
sidelines right now. So yeah, yeah, she really likes that I acknowledge her.
Yeah.
I can feel that, yeah, just as I say it.
Well, welcome to your little
Mm.
one, and I'm glad you're
Mm.
connected with her. And
Mm.
um, I always welcome guests checking in
Mm.
as we go and being
Mm.
within, what's
Mm.
okay for you and your parts as we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I noticed, of course, your recognition of some somatic qualities, and we will be talking
Mm.
about that more today.
Mhm.
I have parts that are remembering when I first met you, which was some years ago now, on a
Mhm.
retreat or a training retreat, I guess, with Chris Burris on
Yeah.
groups, working with groups and healing in groups. And I
Yes.
remember immediately feeling drawn to your presence,
Mhm.
and maybe it's the curly
Mhm.
hair thing. You guys can't see it, but there is something I think that I notice when I see the hair on other people. There's like a point of connection.
Mhm. Yeah. I do remember that sweet connection. It was such a beautiful healing circle and getting to be with one another. It was a beautiful space. So
Mhm.
appreciated that.
Yeah, cool.
Mm.
So can you tell listeners where you are geographically?
Mhm. I live in Northern California. We call it the Bay Area, and I am in Santa Clara and my backyard, which is just lovely getting to look and hear a little bit of the bird song. I'm in the Miwok Ohlone land, which are the native peoples here. And yeah, it's I've been here for about 20 years. And I just love that I get to come outside. And if I do work online, this is where I like to sit, is that I get to actually be outside, which is so my preference if I'm not in person. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, beautiful. And we may get to hear a little bit of the bird chirping. I'm
Mm.
actually not hearing it now, but it was quite lovely when I was hearing it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about anything about your, who you are, any identities that you
Mm.
would like to share with listeners?
Sure, sure. I am a cisgender, queer, mother. Mm. I certainly still see myself as an activist and able-bodied. Um, have been on a journey with this somatic system uh, at a very young age, and so deeply grateful to stay in that relationship with my body through the experiences of trauma. So I often will call myself maybe a bit of a thriver through child sexual abuse. Um, I love to be active, love to be behind the boat, surf or water ski. I love to be in the beach. I love to be in water. That is definitely a common. I love yoga. I love hiking. I love to play soccer, which I haven't done in a couple of years. Um, but I would also consider myself perhaps an athlete. And I'm also a grandchild of parents that were immigrants, all from the same island in Portugal, which is called Terceira, one of the Azorian Islands. So I'm second generation in the States, and yeah, have been certainly getting to know my connection to some of that ancestral history. And maybe lastly, I would say that when I met the somatic peeps at my first retreat in 2022, I thought, oh, this is where my peeps are. We've got movers, and I love to dance. And I felt like I met my people. So I definitely would identify as a body-based um, worker, holder of space. And and I happen to be a therapist. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Those are some of my identities.
Yeah, lovely. I love the breadth of that and kind of the body story that you're sharing, as well as, some of the important parts of your life and evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're kind of leading into this a bit, but I was just curious to see if you wanted to say a little more about, and I don't know which you would put first, like your personal journey or your professional journey, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a little bit of how you got to where you are now in terms of
Mm-hmm.
somatic IFS and the things you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
Okay.
huge question.
Yeah. Well, I'll see if I can
Yeah.
keep it a bit smaller than how wide it can get.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I'll start with a big part of my life shifting when I was about 20 and the secrecy of abuse within my family came out. And I went to see my first therapist and I fell in love with her. I was so deeply grateful for her to show me what it was like to have my voice, to be angry, to allow sadness. And it really planted the seed for me to shift into this work. So again, I was 20. And when I was about 24, 25, I I became an activist, and I kind of lived, with a background of Portuguese and Catholic. So I felt fairly, mm, I was held with a family system that had certain beliefs and things that I knew I didn't actually agree with. And the kind of the restrictive, conservative view of sometimes even sexuality that I felt like I bumped against as a young adolescent. So on my journey through healing and through this continuous journey of exploration led me eventually um, to parallel processes of coming out and going back to school. And I was in my early 30s. And I had married to a man and had our child. And I was also feeling so curious after some years in my marriage what was happening with my own sexuality. So I ended up, of course, divorcing and re-entering school while I all this process was a lot of my exploration around my trauma. And there was a very parallel process there. As an activist in my early 20s, mid 20s, I found my voice, started to tell my story. And that first experience was in the state capitol lobbying for an assembly bill, which is now known as Megan's Law. And I was passionate about bringing advocacy to knowing individuals' histories, if indeed they had perpetrator parts. I felt as a mom that I was whew, did I have a lot of burning, active managerial energy around making sure she was safe. And that was part of my healing journey. So my voice began the healing path. And then I did some advocacy and would respond to cases in the Bay Area around uh, founded sexual abuse situations, whether it be teachers or coaches and all sorts of different scenarios. And I felt like I was simultaneously doing a lot of my own healing and finding ways to um, share, advocate for parents, advocate for children, and it was such a parallel process. And so many folks in my family didn't quite understand that, but for my journey, it mattered that I found my voice. And I felt like it was also my way of working through, I could feel this as I'm sharing it, working through my shame, that actually I could share my story. And for some years, I had to work with the repercussions of sharing it out loud, that be my family upset or my own system being, turning against me for sharing something so intimate and exposing to our family. So it was a dance for many years, and yet a very important one, because underneath that, my heart felt this desire to dispel the secrecy. And that really led me on this path to then eventually going back to school. So I quit a career in my early 30s and adventured back into school. And that's where I studied a holistic studies model, which spoke to me most clearly was transpersonal psychology and somatic psychology. And that was because so much of my healing was because of experiences my body was impacted by and the ways in which my body um, silenced my system, as well as felt somatic impacts of the abuse. So that's where the journey began, and I simultaneously explored my sexuality and came out as I went back to school. So it was a big like, there was so much there. And I couldn't understand why anybody would question my sexuality when it felt so joyful to come out. And yet I had to work with some of my journey with my parents, mostly my mother, wondering if something was wrong with me. But I just remember feeling so joyful and also so stunned by those kinds of responses. But once again, had to find my voice and advocate and really be kind inside with my own self along the way, which really ultimately has been the biggest part of the journey.
I'm just sort of taking in like just different pieces of what you've shared. I guess the big word inside I'm hearing is courage, like how
Mm-hmm.
courageous it sounds like you
Mm-hmm.
were speaking your truth and going in front of the legislature and being very public, and then the
Yeah,
courage of leaving a marriage and
yeah.
coming out and all those things. So just parts of me are just kind of saying, wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of energy and strength and courage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, when I tell it, it's often what I actually remind myself when I'm feeling that uncertainty or that whether I can trust myself. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's just give ourselves some pause to reflect the choices we've made along the way. And yeah, I couldn't understand why I was asked to speak my voice, and yet at the same time I was so called to do so. So those opportunities kind of just landed in my lap, and they made so much sense to me because I think so many people don't talk about their stories. And back then, it was so important to share those stories because there was liberation in sharing them and the hope that I would share the healing that's possible with others. So I didn't know what a hope merchant was then, but it's felt like the hope merchants carried me through these intersections of my life and the ways in which I've chosen to share, and how important that's been for the inside journey to, just as you said, the courage, right? Even just speaking today feels like I haven't spoken about this so much lately,
Mm.
and yet it's such an important instrumental part of my journey in working with others. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how does
this
it
is,
feel to talk about it now, if I may ask?
yeah, I'm noticing some of that rumbling in my that chakra, middle chakra in the solar plexus, that they get a little swirly. um, and they could just feel a little bit of that nervousness. There's a bit of exposure, um, and yet I know how to care for them. So they, again, they also feel so acknowledged when they're there, and I could acknowledge where I know they are in my body. And so I could feel the tenderness of acknowledging them.
Mm.
And they know I'm there. They could
Mm.
feel my and that's a little different than I've often done in the past. I've just told my story, or
Mm.
but I'm really know that when I share, I need to be in contact with them
Mm.
so that
Yeah.
they can also share with me what feels right, what doesn't feel right, and I'm sensitive to them along the way rather than telling a story, throwing up this story,
Right.
and getting so excited in that process actually feels far more attuned to them in the body, which again is our talk, right? Is how do I stay connected to them in the body while I'm sharing this and not overriding what they're communicating?
Mm.
It's not often words, it's often in the body.
Mm.
So they love the slowing down
Mm.
and my sharing and my connecting with them and my knowing that that's them. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's been a really beautiful, growthful edge,
Mm.
which I think ties my somatic IFS journey to deepen some bit of what my journey has been for the last several years. So,
Mm.
yeah.
And you're so beautifully, I think, in real time, kind of illustrating what it looks like or feels like to be in connection with your parts, and how at different points in a healing journey, even like different parts might be leading, like I'm just hearing like the importance of voice and telling your story, but maybe
Yes.
you weren't in a place, or the situation wasn't such
Yes.
that the teller, the advocate, was able to be as present to these more vulnerable parts.
Hmm. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and having done some media, those were circumstances that actually spun me out. So, um, I did an MTV show. It was an anti-violence campaign at the same time like Beavis and Butthead was out, so I was quite skeptical. I was like, "What do you do?" And I was the oldest on the show. I was probably about 27, 28. I was kind of a higher end of their demographics. But I ended up becoming somewhat of like an assistant to them. I'd already been in therapy for a number of years. And several of us told our story on that show. And the ironic piece to that, I lost my voice. The night before they were flying in from New York, I had my family come, the supportive family that they wanted to be, and I lost my voice. And not only did I lose my voice, Patricia, I also, that morning of, my beautiful dog, I just think this synchronicity of this is fascinating, cut his penis on barbed wire and had to actually go to the hospital, the cat vet hospital, to get stitches on his penis. So I just thought that was the most bizarre. Here I am going to be talking about sexual abuse. And all this chaos around me with this, my husband at the time had to leave, and now there's this emergency, and I don't have a voice. And they're there with mics and camera crew, and I have to whisper telling my story. So I had to put the mic really close to my mouth. And they rented a car, which was kind of symbolic of me taking the driver's seat. And it was just this beautifully staged experience. But I also had to speak, and I had to pace my voice as it crackled if I spoke loud. So it was fascinating to see my journey in the way my body was also journeying through what it was like to speak up. And so that was the biggest impact of that was after the show we did. Computers were kind of new, and this was probably in the mid 90s, so 1995, 96-ish or something like that. I'm trying to think how old my daughter was. She was like 2 at the time, so and she's 32, so 30 years ago. She I was asked to be online, and there were like that 1-800 child help number, and thousands of people came online to converse online. And I was that person sort of trying to dialogue a conversation. And I was so overwhelmed. And I felt so responsible for sharing my story and the liberation of that, but also all the pain that was met my system with all this pain and these people sharing their stories. I was just so overwhelmed by it. And that was a hard and challenging place in my life. I remember it so clearly, and how much weight of burden I felt so responsible, as if not as if I caused their pain, but to open that door, right? Open that Pandora's box. And somehow I just imagined all of my pain, all of their pain, and I just felt so deeply overwhelmed by it all. And yet the show did so beautifully, and it was awarded some kind of award for its courage to bring forth a topic that's often not spoken about, especially to the audience that they were reaching, which was just really moving. And I was so grateful to be a part of it.
That's quite
Yeah.
a story, quite an experience, and quite a
Mhm.
story.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm having two different, you know, things coming as I'm listening.
Mhm.
One is
Mm.
just wanting to speak to listeners for a minute, that as we're
Yeah.
getting further into this topic,
Yeah.
this could be opening some doors for listeners too, if they've
Mhm.
experienced childhood sexual abuse. So just wanting
Yeah.
to offer a breath and some kindness, and
Mhm.
to see if there's even anything you might want to say to people
Mhm.
who are listening, who might be personally relating so far with what you're talking
Mhm.
about.
Absolutely. For me, it's that pause to be with my breath. It's between this kind of place of the awareness of what's happening in my body and resonance, which is the connection. That for me, a breath helps bridge both of those. And my body can feel me. Invite your bodies to feel you sitting here, noticing all the ways in which our systems are supported by Earth, maybe even connection to the chair, to this connection down through our feet. And this vertical alignment also brings access to breath. And I think of the air and the spaciousness above, and the ways I connect support me in both ways to just be here with a little more openness, a little more settling, just welcoming whatever's happening, and just ask if it needs some of our care and attention. That sometimes touch really supports that way in which I hold my system for care. It's this extension of care through my hand. Yeah, the only other piece to my story that feels so important around that journey of growth was that I also spoke my story and was asked on television what it was like to be 12. And what I learned from that, and maybe I would want listeners to hear that if they ever feel the courage and the readiness to tell, that they also, I encourage us also not forcing those stories, but notice a full readiness inside, that we also need to be able to share the path of recovery, the path of thriving again. And I spun out after that experience. It was a couple years after the MTV show. I spun out because all that the story was told was my 12-year-old experience, not what it was like to be in my 30s and feeling like that healing journey needed to be spoken for. I felt like all you saw was my 12-year-old. And so I came home so raw, and I swore I would never do that again. And shared with the host in a long email what I thought the impact of that was. And I wanted more sensitivity for hopefully the future people that she ever asked to come on her show, because it really deeply impacted me. So there are many components to that story. And I know someday uh, I want to be able to share that lived story in all the ways my system has chosen to lean in to healing with folks that actually harmed me, um, out of my own really choice to feel the liberation, to feel the empowerment to be in relationship with them, even though they have perpetrator parts and harmed me. And that's been some of my journey, really. That's been such an important part of it, because it's a deep acceptance inside of me that's allowed me to go to those places. And I think that's often what we struggle with is the ways in which we turn abuse against ourselves. And that's actually the juiciest part of the journey for so many of the folks I've worked with. It's like we could work with the ways in which our body is trapped. We can work with the ways in which that relationship was a huge amount of betrayal. And yet, what we've done inside is often the parts we have to also befriend and work with and unburden and care for.
I know you mentioned
Mhm.
shame, which is such a huge thing.
Oh, yes.
Um, Very complex and difficult,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. Yeah, my
Um,
teenager, it's, carried great amounts of shame for all the ways she acted out. Right.
mhm,
And I just love her. I love her. She was such an important part of my
mhm,
journey.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the systemic implications, right? When there has been,
Mm-hmm.
trauma or sexual abuse within intimate web of family relationships, and
Absolutely.
what
Yep.
to distance from, what to heal, what to turn toward, and what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm reminded of something, a part that I worked with who healed around, different kinds of experiences, but experiences that were very difficult and painful and burden for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got to a point where she was like, I don't want you to just remember me
Mm-hmm.
as my most difficult experiences that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just the part that got bullied or the part that, this or
Right.
that. She's like, I I really like did a lot of cool things too, you know.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
getting to know that part, and she was showing me how much she loved playing and being in the woods and making things and, like dancing and like just all those things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just I think I'm just reminded of that. Like
Mm.
when we can continue to be in relationship with our parts and not
Yes.
just sort of go to them when we're the most in
Mhm.
crisis and trying, I mean, anything we do is good.
Right.
I'm not saying that anything has
Yeah.
value, right? So, But
Yes,
when we
yes.
are able to or interested in continuing to cultivate a relationship with those parts, we can further their
Mm-hmm.
healing and
Mm-hmm.
integration. And really, I
Yes.
think that's when we benefit holistically as a person too, right? When we can
Oh, most definitely.
experience those parts.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, Patty. I think that that's so true that that's kind of that journey of getting to know them and supporting their healing. And yet that may not ever be somewhat complete. And yet I think when they get the attention they need and we've witnessed them and cared for them along the way, they also have such beautiful qualities of playfulness, like you said, and the desire to be in nature. Or mine love to dance. Like I've danced since I was like 6. And so they love the spontaneity of dance and the playfulness of dance. And it's one way they love to express themselves. And I think that union and a reunion of them inside is such a beautiful way of expression and staying in resonance with them, right?
Mhm.
Which is one of our
Yeah.
somatic practices. They love that. They love
Mhm.
when I can be on the dance floor or just move my body outside, even in my backyard. Doesn't matter where. But yeah, thanks for sharing that too.
Mhm.
It's an important
Mhm.
part to share. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm.
So would now be a good time to maybe share a bit more with listeners about what
Yeah,
somatic IFS is and what the
yeah,
practices are?
yeah, yeah. So, you know, I love IFS, and I found it probably about 5 years before I found the somatic IFS work by Susan McConnell. And when I landed in the somatic IFS retreat for the first time in 2022, it entailed things that I absolutely felt an opening for my own body and my own system, and it felt a welcome. My body felt such a welcome there to lean in. And before I knew it, I was DJing for Susan, and in the middle of um, breaks or lunch, I would put music on. I would go in the mornings really early and move my body with music. And I felt had been grieving, so the music just I felt like everything woke up inside of me, and it was in the midst of COVID 2022, right? So we were still in that transitional of process of coming back together, which I so deeply missed. I'm quite an extrovert. So, yeah, so I love the practices that Susan speaks about in her book, Somatic IFS. And every single one of them felt like practices that my system has known on the journey of my life, right? So, do you want me to name them? Would that be helpful? Yeah, yeah. So, the foundation of it all is somatic awareness. And how we bring, of course, awareness is foundational. Without awareness, and this comes to sexuality too. I've been thinking a lot about these intersections of sexuality in our practices, but to notice every movement, every touch, right, is about bringing awareness to the body. And I love that practice, and it's just foundational to this work. And of course, conscious breath is our second practice. And how we interweave that isn't about changing our breath, but it's actually being with our breath. And that to me can build, um, we call embodied self, or self as the expanded state of consciousness. And I think that breath is this bridge between the first practice I mentioned, which of course is somatic awareness, as well as resonance, which is our third practice. And resonance for me is this relational connection inside to my system, which speaks very somatically, but I also have parts that speak and are verbal, but it often speaks to me somatically. But I'm in resonance and in connection with the system. But I'm also in resonance with you right now. And I also bridge the resonance of connection with external. And that may be our clients, our relationships, our bodies. Um, and so resonance and radical resonance is our third practice. And our most playful practice, which often becomes one of my favorites, is the mindful movement. And how might our body move in ways that allow us to connect more deeply with these bodies? And often in my system, I could think of a very dissociative part. And the only way I could connect with it was in silence, but with moving my hand in the way it felt like it was swirling above my head and around the right side of my body. And so I just was invited, so thankfully, by my therapist that's does a lot with authentic movement, just invited me to move with it. And what I noticed is by moving with it, it allowed me to understand it and connect with it. And it felt me when I could actually move with it. So to me, movement is, I can access movement and dance. I won't call it dance because I call it movement more so than dance. Dance kind of creates some parts that of many folks that go, uh-oh, there's somehow a rhythm you're supposed to follow, but that's not what I mean by dance or movement. It's really just listening and following the body. And our last is attuned touch. And when we can explore attuned touch, it may be the system's way of receiving connection and resonance. And attuned touch can also such a bridge of sexuality is it doesn't even have to be actual touch. It could be a touch of our energy, could be a touch of our intentions for connection. It could be touch with um, the guidance of nature, the wind touching my skin right now. Could be touch in healing journeys, could be the touch of a well ancestor that comes and supports our journey, or the way in which we can lean into earth or a tree or our favorite place in nature that supports our system feeling being held to explore what's needed, what parts of our system maybe can heal with attuned touch. So these are all extended ways working with our bodies to expand that healing journey of IFS. And so when I found this, I felt like, this is my language. These are my peeps. And when I read Susan's book, I just kept saying, yes, this is this is what my therapy looks like. I'm a body-based psychotherapist. And you might tell me a story, but I'm so deeply curious what it's like. What's the lived experience in the moment as you share this? And that to me is also the wisdom that needs to be invited to come through. And when we don't include the body throughout the journey, I think we're missing out on so much that can also heal and be accessed for healing. So, yeah.
Mm. That was so beautiful and so poetic how you took
Mm,
us through those practices and
mm,
with your own special flavor to it as well, I think. And
mm,
that was really
mm,
lovely.
mm.
Um,
Thank you.
and I'm reminded of when I first went on Susan's retreat in Costa Rica,
Mm,
which is where she used to be the only place she did her retreats, I think, and now she's
yeah.
expanded elsewhere. And I love Susan and her work because I know in my with my own system, like when I get deep into connection with some of those deeper parts, or like a just things really settle, I have had the experience that the act of speaking takes me away from it.
Mm, yes.
So
Yes.
when I'm in a therapy situation and I need to be talking, it felt like that took me out, and it was okay to do
Mhm.
that sometimes. But if that was the main modality, I felt like, so
Yeah.
in Susan's retreat, I felt there was so much room to stay in my inner connection. And then to have an opportunity after a more complete experience to share more about it verbally with
Yes.
someone else if I wanted to or needed to. And so uh, I just appreciate how it is powerful to allow the body to do its thing and to bring awareness and to be in the
Yes.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge how scary that is for so many of us to actually trust and get to know how the body might communicate too, right? And that's, I think, the bridge that to me so deepens the model in a way that we don't often understand sometimes, and yet when there's a witness that can hold the trust that I trust your body will know the way through this. And it may not be verbal. We may not hear what's going on, but we may actually have to witness what the body's needing through a movement, through some kind of story being told through the body's expression. Uh, it, I could feel it, how moving that is. And what an honor to be with others on the staff team to hold a container that deeply has trust, that when they can wake up to their body, how much is there. And that's why people come on our retreats, right? Um, it's sacred. It's so beautiful. And I just feel like it's such an honor to be a witness in that. And it makes my system it serves my system so sweetly too. My heart ends up feeling so big and so joyful. It's not always easy, and yet there's also such a liberation to that space that we explore together. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I'm curious then about um, looking at sexuality. And, one of the elements in the self-led sexuality model that I have been developing is, it's IFS and then somatic practices or
Hmm.
embodied practices, because, we can relate with our own sexuality and our own sexual energy or someone else's to the degree that we are able to access it.
Yes.
Right. And so the more embodied we are, and I know if that word can be very confounding to people, like, what are you even talking
Mhm.
about? What does it mean to be embodied? And I feel like the
Yeah,
language can really fall short on something that is very experiential.
absolutely.
But to try to have a satisfying connection with yourself or with someone else sexually,
Mhm.
um, if we just go through those again, those practices, I feel like it could help to illuminate how the practices could be helpful to people. And,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
somatic awareness, for instance,
Mhm.
where am I? What am I feeling right now?
Mhm.
What's present?
Mhm. And can
You
we
know?
even slow it down
Yeah.
to be with that, all the awareness of
Mhm.
sensations
Right.
happening? Yes.
Mhm. Because this awareness thing, some people it's just very easy. I know what I'm feeling. I know when I'm a little
Mhm.
bit aroused. I know what feels
Mhm.
good in my body. I know what
Mhm.
I like. I know how to ask for it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that, is a blessing, I think, and a privilege in a way, to be that
Mhm.
connected that easily, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And can we bring curiosity maybe to that partner that doesn't have necessarily such access by supporting the slowing down and being with them so that they can actually attune to those awarenesses they have, the
Mhm.
sensations they have, and where are their edges,
Mhm.
right? So maybe it be
Yeah.
through even just imagination or touch, or
Mhm.
even not even touch quite yet, maybe skin to skin, but even just with our hands,
Mhm.
exploring from a distance what sensations maybe spark based on maybe what they're not so familiar with in their bodies.
Mhm.
So, but to me, pacing is the key. It's slow, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
though our systems get really excited,
Yeah.
can we still slow things down, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. I know that as I started really listening to my body more and more, it was
Mm-hmm.
somewhat distressing to some of
Mm-hmm.
my parts,
Yeah.
and perhaps at times to my partner, uh, how
Yeah.
slow I really like it to be. And sort of like my body and my,
Yeah.
experience, it's like the slower it goes, the more sensation opens.
Yes.
If you just picture sort
Beautiful.
of like a little, you know, bead, like a little bead of honey or something, just how
Yeah.
slow that could be if it kind of like breaks off and like falls, just so slow.
Yeah.
But like there's
And how
more and
arousing, actually. Just imagining a honey drop, right? Just
yeah,
arousing when
right.
you
The
slow
slower
down.
it is and the more attuned and like,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
that's a great awareness little experiment right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember being in my 40s and my partner older than me was kind of in menopause. But in my 40s, I was still so like driven. I was like, come
Mhm.
on. And I just remember the urgency my system felt. Like I was anticipating somehow things shifting. I kept hearing how menopause, creates such restrictions of the body or limitations of the body. And yet, I actually haven't found that to be true. And yet, at times, it has with hot flashes and sweats, and sometimes too much heat near me, or even just my own body and excitement was just overwhelming at times, right? But I just remember having to like invite my system to slow down, and yet that dance between the body, what it wanted, and yet the system saying slow, it was so complicated. It felt so swirly, is what I
Mhm.
could describe, right? So swirl.
Mhm.
I'm sure we know, many of us know what that feels like, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
how breath for me has been somewhat of a gift to access some of that excitement. Like, can I bring breath to that excitement?
Mhm.
And bring myself back into the body, holding some of that excited energy
Mhm.
and actually letting my system slow down so I can cherish that moment,
Mhm.
cherish the pleasure that's being offered, right? And
Mhm.
what a practice. This is not something like you said, like you got it. This is a journey each time in our sexuality, right? Each time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that segue to breath, right? And how the breath is always with us
Mm.
and how we can be holding our breath without realizing it.
Yeah.
And just like I just want to invite curiosity because sometimes we sort of like hold our breath and don't realize it. And sometimes that's enhancing that little bit
Yes.
of tension, that builds up. But
Yes.
sometimes that could also be kind of constipating a bit.
Yes.
Like not letting the energy, the sexual energy really
Well,
like
yeah,
move and expand.
absolutely. It could involve a tightening and a holding and a
Hmm.
restricting and an
Yeah.
alarm to the body if we're holding
Hmm.
our breath too long, right? So
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a pattern I know.
Hmm.
So thank you for naming. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are many conscious breathing practices that I know a lot of
Yes.
people use and explore, from yoga to tantra to like other kinds of
Mhm.
holotropic breath work. There's a lot of
Yes.
conscious ways people use breathing
Yes.
and breath, and specifically in sexuality. And
Mhm.
again, I just always invite curiosity, and noticing, are there parts that are like maybe some, manager parts, who want to do aggressive breathing
Mhm.
practices in
Yes.
order to create some kind of effect.
Sure. Sure.
Um, Taking a breath with those, right? Like,
Yeah.
welcome, breathing manager parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
like, can we take a pause and just see, or is my whole system good with this? Like, are we all interested in experimenting with these
Yeah.
breathing practices?
Yes.
And so that everyone's included.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Beautiful.
and then there is just the organic sort of just noticing of breath. And more, I feel like when I want to connect with my parts or when I'm guiding people, I'll often say,
Hmm.
just maybe take a breath with that part,
Hmm.
or maybe that part can
Hmm.
feel you there or notice your breath or,
Hmm.
um, yeah.
Hmm. Beautiful.
And then the next practice would be resonance, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
any come to mind on this
Mm.
sexuality theme when it comes to resonance?
Well, I actually could, I think would might be helpful is to share some of my own experience currently in my life, um, that I've been thinking about as I was somewhat loosely preparing for this. But I think about my attunement to my spouse and my partner around resonance would be that I get really playful and sexually playful. And sometimes I have a way in which um, I could be really forward and direct, and sometimes it startles her. And it's not intentional. But what I do know is if I'm not attuned to my own excitement, the last thing I want is to startle her. I actually want to make my move or make my invitation more mindfully. And that to me is where my resonance comes in, is that I could sometimes, if I'm not mindful of it, I'll come in and it just is like, whoa. And then I feel like I'm not in resonance, right? In resonance, I will kind of be more not cautious, but I will be mindful of my excitement and feel it out a little, right? I might come in more slowly, more mindfully with my movement and see if there's an openness, see if there's a connection, and see if there's a way in which I can offer an invitation of play with my sexual energy, but that's mindful. I've been with her enough to know that that's been such an important learning in our resonance, in our relationship. So to me, that's an exploration with resonance, right?
Mm,
That's been a really important journey because when I just get excited, I just get really play. I'll have music playing. Next thing I know, I want to dance on her, or play on her, and just I will want to pin her up against the wall. And she's like, well, okay, not to say she doesn't get aroused sometimes, but sometimes it's not the right moment, and so the resonance isn't there, the attunement
mhm,
isn't there, and
mhm,
so to me, it's a great way to describe, I think, resonance. I have
mhm,
to attune to my own system
mhm,
and then attune to hers and see where maybe there's an opening, maybe there isn't, and that's okay, right?
mhm,
But maybe
mhm,
I love Esther Perel's simmer a little because
mhm,
I don't mind simmering and letting my system just acknowledge there's a simmering and yes, there's some energy here and I could own that and take responsibility for that and just let my partner know, right?
mhm.
There's simmering, simmering over here.
That is
So
such a great example. Thank you for sharing that. I love
yeah.
that too. And it reminds me to mix metaphors here in the S's. It reminds me
Mhm.
of the sensitive S, which I kind of
Yeah.
take in as attunement a lot, like the
Yes.
sensitivity to sort of really be perceptive,
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
could be sensitive to our own parts and sensitivity to
Hmm.
partners.
Hmm.
And for some
Hmm.
people, sensitivity is so open that things are easily overly
Yes.
stimulating.
Yes.
But this idea of feel like just slow again, the slowing down theme, that should be another S. So slowing down enough to sort of feel, where am I at? Where is my partner at? How can we, find each other?
Mhm.
in this.
Mhm. Yeah,
Beautiful.
and I've had to work with younger parts that have felt uh, like rejected, right? That's like my teenagers, like, what? I'm not being desired, like, but it actually has nothing to do with her. So when she could feel more of my presence, more of my embodied self or my conscious self, then I don't set myself up to be hurt. Like I could play and still feel that playfulness, even if I'm not being met with a response. It's still mine. I can still stay aroused. I can still please myself if I need to, but I don't have to interject that hurt that I'm somehow being rejected. I don't want to make an assumption. I'm always going to be met. It's okay when I'm not. And
Mm.
I think that's an important growthful edge in our journey together is that it's not personal. We're just sometimes in different places. And and it's been really important to still stay playful, even if parts of me assume I'll be rejected and they don't want me to. That's been a journey inside of my own system.
Mm.
So it's an important one that I've
Yeah,
lived.
it's so powerful, and something I hadn't really thought about with resonance is how do we stay resonant within
Yeah.
ourselves if we're not maybe getting the resonance we're seeking,
Yes. Yes.
externally.
Yes. That's why resonance to me is me being present with my system in union with and an extension. So to me, resonance is inside and external. So it goes both directions.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, so I'm in Philly and we have the Liberty Bell here. And
Mm.
I also have a part playing that old disco's hit Ring My Bell.
Yes.
And for me, resonance is a huge like language for my system because I feel like I'm sort of
Yeah.
vibrational and ways when something touches me as just deeply true or
Mhm.
deeply moving, I sort of feel
Mhm.
this like a bell,
Mhm. Mhm.
vibrating.
Vibration. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. So resonance is
Mm.
big for that.
Mhm.
So then the next
Beautiful.
practice is that mindful movement, which,
Movement. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
very relevant
So
to
relevant.
sensuality, sexuality,
Mhm.
and yeah, curious if you've been simmering on that one too.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where actually it's probably one of my ways of connection with my sexuality is movement. So not only am I attuned to the sensations, but I think that the bridge for me also is in movement. I love moving to music. It can be very arousing, either to feel the movement of my own body or witnessing movement is arousing. So I've been thinking about movement and sexuality. For me, it's a very active practice that actually, like I have playlists that are sexuality playlists because any one of those songs can titillate or excite my system, and it feels for some reason there's certain music that brings movement and my body alive. So I love the practice of movement when it comes to sexuality, and it may be just and the playfulness wherever we are around movement in sexual experiences. So yeah, that feels like a fun one.
Yeah. And I could say that I think a lot of ways that burdens can live in people's bodies
Yes.
restrict movement.
Oh, abs.
And so there's personal lived experience burdens.
Yes.
And then there's these cultural legacy burdens. And
Absolutely.
so, like for a lot of people, they're very locked up,
Mhm.
in bed and
Yes.
don't feel freedom to move much.
Mhm.
And I think even
Mhm.
in my own, as much as I very much enjoy movement generally, there's a lot of unconscious,
Mhm.
um, just automatic kinds of beliefs that
Yes.
I had to discover were there, but that would, I, sort of felt like I'm not the one who moves,
Mm-hmm.
and in a
Mm-hmm.
kind of gendered, heteronormative relationship structure.
Absolutely.
I could sort of get into this idea of a more passive role, or like not moving. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think
Mm-hmm.
bringing curiosity to like, what's our comfort level with movement? Do
Mm-hmm.
we want to be moving? Do we know what parts of us would be interested? And sometimes even just like experimenting with teeny bits of
Yes.
movement, wiggling your fingers, like letting your fingers move,
Yes.
even if the rest of you isn't, moving very much, or there's like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
very small things, that
Yeah.
can almost, I feel like they almost start to bring that movement network online a bit, sometimes with very small movements.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will say those of us with trauma related to the bodies also is quite an exploration, right? Because the process of stuck is often in there. And I think that I'll say in regards to hosting groups exploring movement, which is often what I do in our retreats, um, stillness is movement. And I think that the idea of, like you just said, folks that come want to get to know what movement's like, and yet they're in that stunned kind of place, maybe frozen, maybe stuck. There's always so many fascinating processes that are creating the stuck or the stillness, maybe voluntary, maybe involuntary. And yet, how can we just get to know with witness what it's like to even just move, like you said, a finger, even just move a foot, even just be with the ways in which the body will hold us and not allow us, and befriend, get curious what it's like
Mhm.
to get to know restriction, to get to know the holding down, and and that there is no right way to move, right? And there is no there's no. That's often what I'll say is, just because I move doesn't mean it's the right way to move. Like, that's my movement. What's your body's movement? And can we get curious about that together? So I love the practice of mirroring when we're exploring movement, and even in partnership, or in the therapeutic setting, or in the retreat space where there is a journey of curiosity, is just mirroring that space and holding that space so tenderly around moving so simply, and yet may
Mhm.
not feel so simple to the body.
Yeah.
Um, it's such a beautiful place to start for systems that carry the burdens of not moving for various reasons, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that.
And then attuned touch.
Mm.
So much to say there. And of
Mhm.
course, that one might be the most obviously relatable
Mhm. Mhm.
around sex, and
Yes.
sexuality.
Yeah, and I think what I'll expand and share about attuned touch as a somatic IFS practice is the attunement is in our system, in our bodies. And so for me, in a sexual act or in a therapeutic setting, right, there's not, those don't go together. Typically
Mhm.
for my practice, they don't, but for many they may. But the idea that I'm in my body, attuned to my system. And so in therapeutic settings where touch, it can be a bit of a taboo in therapy, but yet it's such a beautiful practice. And throughout my practice, I've always used touch, where clients, it's just that one moment where touch may be the gateway through something, because they were so alone, and yet our touch can be a way in which it facilitates some kind of shift, right? Or their own attuned touch to their system is such a beautiful bridge for connection, and for the system maybe to feel something they never received when it was most important. So when we bring that to sexuality, I think that when I think about intention, like if I'm coming in with attunement, I don't know where we're going, but I'll meet my partner in that moment and see where we go. But if I come in with an agenda, that doesn't feel very attuned for some particular outcome. So to me, touch is very, it's the same parallel to when I reach to, let's say, a rescuing in touch can be like, you're so uncomfortable, I need to hug you.
Mm,
Feels similar to the way in which I want to touch you and get what I want sexually, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but can we name that and be conscious of it? Is that my body is wanting something? But can we attune to that as well as including the resonance in relationship? That to me
mhm,
is not, it's not a either or, but it's a with, it's an and. Um, so I felt like all of these practices would make sense in sexuality, right? Makes sense in our aliveness when we're in our bodies, sharing our bodies, maybe arousing ourselves. It just felt like every practice felt like, yeah, in my ideal experience of sexuality, these practices all are so relevant.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty delicious to explore these together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, something in me is sort of wanting to say, and I probably think this is probably true of almost anything that we focus in on with full awareness as we can, but that just like each of the S's can be what I call sort of a portal to pleasure.
Mhm.
Probably each of these practices as well,
Mhm.
could be, right? Like when our system really allows a very large opening,
Yes.
right? That
Yeah.
we could have sort of a very peak kind of experience, through
Mhm.
touch or through breath or
Mhm.
through awareness,
Mhm.
um, and certainly in combination.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love the way you've taught self-led sexuality. I think it's just a beautiful gift to the community. It's something I don't think is spoken often enough. So, and I love the bridge of somatic IFS with it. I sat with it and thought it's a brilliant blend, honestly,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
felt excited about having this conversation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Mhm.
So, is there anything else that you want to share?
I actually would love to read a poem. And I loved this. It's a Rumi quote. And there is one way of breathing that is full of shame and constriction. Then there is another way, a breath of love that takes you all the way to infinity. I just felt like that was so relevant to this
Mm,
conversation.
mm, lovely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can you share a bit more about what you're doing now and how people can find you?
Yeah. So I have been for the last almost year or so. Susan's asked a few of us to be assistant trainers, and so I'm on a path of co-leading with her and facilitating with a colleague and I, Marcella Cox, um, to start making some offerings to the community that are maybe not IFS trained, but IFS informed, and introducing the intersection of somatic IFS to the community that maybe doesn't have um, the honor of actually training, et cetera. Maybe practitioners, they could be coaches, they could be body workers, et cetera. So we're excited about offering that. It's a course in January. And that can all be found. I think you have all of my links. That's through the Soleology website. And I think I mentioned also Susan's website. So I'm excited. It's a transition. I'm running a lot of somatic IFS consultation groups, and for those that have trained with us through step one and step two, and some workshops I'm offering, but also some of my groups are for folks that maybe are curious and have learned IFS but don't actually know much about somatic IFS. So all of those groups incorporate somatic practices, somatic IFS practices. So it's been a bit of a shift, and I'm doing certainly still seeing clients that have been with me for quite some time, and I see them in person, and then I balance that with some of the online work that I'm doing. And I'm not closing my practice, but um, I'm not actually soliciting to see more folks in my practice at my office. So that's feels like a bit of a shift. And I love working. It feels very like the timing feels right. I've loved to teach in the past, and I've been a trainer of a model called the process therapy. It was an institute that I actually was very much a part of for many years of my career, and it's called the Process Therapy Institute. And it's a model that brings what's alive in the moment. And when I met at IFS, I just felt like the bridge was already there, and so much that I studied and learned from Don Hadlock, one of my dear teachers, was the aliveness of what's in the moment. And to me, that is what parts are. Is our system shows up in that way through whether it be sensations, thoughts, or feelings. And so it was this beautiful bridge. And I'm still incorporating my process work, IFS and somatic IFS, and do it all. And I think moments like this, I get to see the ways in which it actually feels like it's alive in me. And that has been a fun way to incorporate what I love the most are these somatic practices. So yeah, so that's what I'm up to.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
definitely have your links in the show notes. And
yeah, thank you.
my closing question is if there's anything you'd like to share that you find pleasurable in life. You've shared a lot already, but if there's anything you want to name that you haven't named yet.
Mm. I love being in the spaciousness of nature and remembering the gifts nature. It's like being in relationship with nature often reminds me of Earth and the teachings nature can offer. I feel like being in relationship, caring for, Mother Earth has been such a big part of being willing to receive from her, but also care for her. And um, I feel the aliveness of nature. I feel the aliveness in me. And there's a bridge there that I'm often so sweetly reminded of, whether it be even just sitting here in my backyard or sitting at the beach or leaning up against a redwood tree. Um, I love the gifts nature offers to remind me just to breathe, to be with, to slow down. Yeah. So,
Lovely. Well,
yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
so much, LaDonna. What a
Mm,
gift you've shared with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty. And I so deeply appreciate the time to share and give gratitude to those that we've learned from as well, and the people that are our ancestors and our teachers. We wouldn't be here without all the beautiful work they've done ahead of us. So deep gratitude for them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.